The moment I realized my husband had no intention of ever introducing me to his colleagues, I was standing in the parking garage of the Harrington Convention Center in a dress I'd bought specifically for that night, watching the elevator doors close on his face while he mouthed the words, "I'll explain later." He never did. That was 3 years before everything fell apart. Back then, I told myself he was just nervous about mixing his professional world with his home life. A lot of people are like that, I thought. He's under pressure. The firm is demanding. I understood pressure. I'd spent 6 years as a senior structural engineer at my own company before I followed him to Chicago when his firm offered him a regional director position. I'd put my career on pause, just temporarily. We agreed, while I freelanced from home and helped him settle in. The temporary part quietly disappeared from our vocabulary somewhere around year 2. My name is Vera. I was 38 when my marriage ended, 40 when I understood what had actually happened to it. My husband, I'll call him by what he was to me for 14 years, my husband, was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Completely, effortlessly, and always in service of something they needed from you. His name was Adrian. He had the kind of confidence that fills a room without shouting, and I'd mistaken it for strength for longer than I cared to admit. When we met, I was the one with the reputation. I'd led the structural redesign of a mid-rise residential project in Austin that won a regional AIA award. My portfolio was solid. I had offers from 2 firms in Dallas and 1 in New York. Adrian was a project manager at the firm where I consulted, smart, ambitious, and openly impressed by my work. That last part mattered more than I understood at the time. We married after 2 years. The Chicago move came 18 months later. In Chicago, I freelanced. Small contracts, mostly residential. I took them because I could fit them around our life, around his schedule, his dinners, his client visits that I was never quite included in. I told myself I was being flexible. Supportive. That's what partners do. What I didn't notice, or chose not to, was that my work had begun bleeding into his. It started small. He'd bring home project files and ask me to look something over. Just a second opinion, he'd say. A structural calculation that didn't add up. A load-bearing wall assessment the junior engineers had flagged. I'd sit at the kitchen counter in my sweatpants and fix it in 20 minutes, and he'd take it back to the office and present it at Monday's meeting. I didn't mind. He was my husband. Then it became a rhythm. He'd come home with a problem, I'd solve it, and he'd leave with it. The problems got bigger. A 6-story mixed-use development in the West Loop, where the original foundation plan had a flaw that would have cost the client hundreds of thousands in future repairs. I caught it at 11 at night while he paced behind me on the phone with his project lead. A parking structure in Evanston where the wind load calculations were wrong. A school expansion in Oak Park that needed a full structural narrative rewritten for the city permit submission. I wrote all of it. His name went on all of it. I kept telling myself it was a partnership, that his success was our success. We had a mortgage. We had a daughter, Piper, who was 7 when this pattern really took hold. Adrian was rising fast at the firm, his salary was growing, we were saving, and I thought, this is temporary. My turn will come. We'll get to a point where I can step back into my career full-time, and he'll carry the load for a while. He had other plans. I found out about his assistant the way women in these stories always find out. By accident, in a moment so mundane it felt insulting. I was using his laptop to print the school permission form because mine was updating. His email was open. A thread between him and a woman named Kira, his project coordinator, was at the top of the inbox. I didn't need to read far. I sat in the kitchen for 45 minutes not moving. Piper was at a sleepover. The house was completely quiet. I remember the hum of the refrigerator and the way the neighbor's porch light made a rectangle on our kitchen floor, and thinking, how long? I went back and read the full thread, 3 months, maybe longer. Those were just the emails I could see. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I lay next to my husband that night and did not sleep. Here is something nobody tells you about discovering a betrayal. The first thing you feel isn't rage. It's a strange, cold clarity. Every small thing you'd explained away suddenly re-explains itself correctly. The conferences he went to alone. The client dinners I was never invited to. The way he'd started criticizing my clothes, my haircut, my opinions at dinner parties, small cuts, always disguised as jokes. I had been slowly repositioned in our life from partner to inconvenience, and I had let it happen because I was busy holding up his career with both hands. I said nothing for 2 weeks. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I moved. I went back through my records. I am an engineer. I document everything. I found 6 years of files on my external hard drive, original structural reports with my name in the document metadata, email exchanges where I'd sent Adrian the completed calculations, drafts with my tracked changes still embedded, time-stamped versions that told the whole story chronologically, projects that had won his firm commendations, projects that had been used to justify his last 2 promotions. Then I made an appointment with an attorney. She was a family law attorney on Michigan Avenue, a referral from my college friend back in Austin who'd been through a difficult divorce herself. I walked into that office with a flash drive and a printed timeline, and she looked at me across the desk and said, "You've been doing the work of a licensed structural engineer on commercial projects without credit or compensation. That's not just a divorce issue." She referred me to an intellectual property attorney as well. Over the next 6 weeks, I started building a second life parallel to the one Adrian thought I was living. During the day, I was the same. I made Piper's lunch. I showed up to her soccer games. I had dinner on the table. I smiled at the right moments and asked Adrian about his projects with the same wifely interest I'd always shown, because he still brought the files home, and I still needed to see them. I was documenting in real time now. Every email I sent him with a completed report, every markup, every revision. I forwarded copies to my own account and to a secure folder my attorney had set up. I found out from Piper, by accident, that Kira had been introduced to her. My daughter said it casually on a Tuesday evening while I was helping her with a science project. Daddy's work friend has a really nice car. She picked him up once when his was in the shop. I kept my voice level. "Oh yeah? What's her name?" "Kira," Piper said, squinting at her poster board. She smelled like too much perfume. I excused myself to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub for a few minutes. That was the moment the clarity hardened into something colder. The annual awards dinner for the Illinois chapter of the American Institute of Architects was held every spring at a hotel in the Gold Coast neighborhood. I had attended exactly once, 3 years earlier, when Adrian had let me come. I'd spent that evening alone at a table while he worked the room, and on the way home he'd told me with genuine irritation that I'd made him seem distracted. I hadn't gone back. That year, I found out about the dinner because Piper brought home a dry cleaning receipt from Adrian's coat pocket. She had a habit of emptying pockets before the laundry pile grew. His tuxedo had been cleaned. The dinner was in 4 days. I called the venue and confirmed the date. I reached out to a former colleague from my Austin days, a woman named Bet, who now worked at one of the larger structural firms in Chicago, and asked if she was attending. She was. I asked if she could add me to her firm's table guest list as a +1. She said, of course, without asking too many questions. Bet had always been perceptive. The night of the dinner, I told Adrian I was going to my book club. I got there 20 minutes before he did. When he walked in with Kira, not as a colleague, not slightly apart with professional distance, but with his hand on the small of her back, I was already seated at Bet's firm's table near the center of the room. He didn't see me at first. I watched him for a few minutes, easy, confident, laughing at something Kira said, shaking hands with people who knew him as the man responsible for work I had done. When he finally scanned the room and found my face, I watched his expression go through 5 stages in about 2 seconds. I raised my water glass at him. He excused himself and crossed the room. "What are you doing here?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but his jaw was tight. "I was invited," I said. "You look nice." "Vera, you should get back to your table," I said. "We can talk at home." I stayed for the entire dinner. I spoke with Bet and her colleagues. I watched Adrian accept a commendation for a structural innovation on a downtown renovation project, a project whose entire structural narrative I had written on a Sunday afternoon in February in 3 hours, because his team's draft had been unpresentable. When they read the project description aloud, I recognized every sentence. I drove home before Adrian did. I sat in my car in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house, the mortgage we shared, the bedroom window where Piper's nightlight made the curtain glow faintly, and I thought about the woman I had been when we moved here, how certain I was that I was choosing stability, choosing partnership, choosing wisely. I had chosen to disappear. I went inside and made coffee and called my attorney. The divorce filing happened on a Thursday, quietly, while Adrian was on site in Evanston. I had spoken with both my family law attorney and the intellectual property attorney by then. The IP case was complex. Commercial structural work, attribution, the question of what constituted compensation within a marriage. But what my attorneys agreed on was this. I had documented evidence of significant professional contributions made under my engineering license that had been presented as my husband's work to his firm and to clients. That was a matter well beyond just our marriage. My family law attorney also pointed out something I hadn't fully processed. Adrian had, on at least 3 occasions, submitted permit documents to the city of Chicago that included my structural calculations without proper attribution. Depending on how the licensing board interpreted the situation, that created a professional liability for the firm. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I want to be clear about that. I had a daughter. Adrian was her father. I wasn't looking for a scorched earth outcome, but I was done disappearing. I sent an email to the managing partner at Adrian's firm 2 days after the divorce filing. Not an accusation, a factual letter, drafted with my attorney's help, that outlined my involvement in 8 specific projects over the past 4 years, attached the original time-stamped documentation, and requested a meeting to discuss proper attribution and, where applicable, compensation. I CD'd the firm's legal counsel. Adrian called me 11 minutes after I sent it. I let it go to voicemail. I was in the middle of updating my professional profile on the AIA directory, putting my Chicago work back under my name, carefully and accurately, for the first time. He left 3 voicemails that afternoon. I didn't listen to them until the following morning, while Piper was at school and I was sitting on the back porch with coffee in both hands. I don't know what you think you're doing. Pause. This is going to blow everything up. For both of us. Pause. I need you to call me back. The last one was quieter. More tired. Vera, please. The meeting with the firm happened 10 days later. I brought both attorneys. The managing partner, a man in his 60s who had built the firm over 30 years and had no patience for liability, sat across the table and looked at the documentation I'd provided and did not say a single word for a long moment. Then he looked at Adrian, who was across the table from me, and said, "How long has this been going on?" Adrian said, "It was collaborative. She was always involved. She's not listed on a single document," the managing partner said. "She preferred it that way," I said, quietly. "I have every email where I submitted completed work to my husband to present as his own. I have the metadata on every file. I have the drafts with my tracked changes. I did not prefer it this way. I didn't understand the full picture of what was happening." The managing partner looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at my attorneys. Then he said he'd be back in 20 minutes and he left the room with his own legal counsel. It was a long 20 minutes. In the end, the firm did several things. They restructured attribution on internal records for the 8 projects. They offered a settlement, an amount I'm not able to disclose. but one my family law attorney called significant and appropriate. They also accepted Adrian's resignation, which my attorney later told me had been requested rather than offered. I found that out from Bet, who heard it from someone at the firm. The divorce took 11 months. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not 50-50, but with my attorney's documentation of my career sacrifices, my contributions to his professional advancement, and the income differential that his promotions had created, the settlement was fair. More than fair. Piper stays with me 4 nights a week. She knows her parents don't live together anymore. She doesn't know much else, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as I can. 3 months after the settlement finalized, I got a call from a structural engineering firm in Lincoln Park, a small firm, 6 people, doing interesting mid-rise residential and adaptive reuse work. They'd seen my updated portfolio. They'd confirmed my work on 2 of the projects where attribution had been corrected. The founding partner asked if I'd be interested in coming on as a senior associate. I said I'd like to think about it. I took 2 weeks. I visited the office. I met the team. I looked at their project pipeline and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The particular pull of work that actually wants you. I signed the offer on a Tuesday afternoon. Piper was doing homework at the kitchen table when I came back from dropping off the signed paperwork. She looked up and said, "You look different." Different how? She thought about it with the serious consideration that 7-year-olds bring to important questions. Like when a song comes back on that you forgot you liked. I laughed, and it caught me off guard. The realness of it. My name is on my office door now. It's on the permit submissions, the structural reports, the project files. It's in the AIA directory with my actual body of work properly listed. When a client asks who designed the structural system for their building, the answer is my name. I think about the woman who stood in a parking garage watching elevator doors close and told herself I'll explain later on his behalf. She had no idea that the explanation she was owed had nothing to do with him. Some things you don't reclaim loudly. You just stop letting them be taken. And then you do the work. And then one day, your name is simply where it was always supposed to be. I kept my external hard drive in the bottom drawer of my desk for 6 years without fully understanding what it was. I thought it was a backup. Turns out it was a record. Every file I'd ever sent my husband. Every report with my name buried in the metadata. Every email that began with "here's the corrected version" and ended with him walking into a Monday meeting and presenting it as his own thinking. I hadn't been careless. I hadn't been naive, exactly. I'd been trusting in the way that people trust when they've decided that someone else's success is also theirs. And I'd kept receipts without realizing I was keeping receipts. That distinction matters to me now. Because when the moment came where I had to defend what I'd built, I could. Not loudly, not with anger, just with documentation and a clear account of what had actually happened. I think about what it took to get there, not the legal part, but the internal part. The part where you have to be honest with yourself about how much you already knew and chose not to look at directly. That kind of honesty is hard. It's easier to keep the peace, to tell yourself the arrangement is temporary, to put your own ambitions in a drawer and tend to someone else's. I did that for 6 years, and I don't say that with self-pity, because I also understand now that every choice I made during those years was mine, even the ones I made by not choosing. What changed me wasn't the betrayal. It was Piper telling me in that completely matter-of-fact way that children tell you things, that my husband's project coordinator had a really nice car. Something in me just settled, went still, and in that stillness I understood that the life I was protecting by staying quiet had already changed without my permission, and that the only question left was whether I was going to be honest about it or not. Being honest required me to think clearly. I went back through everything. I read my own files like evidence. I called an attorney. I built a case not out of revenge, but out of the simple need to have what was mine called what it was. That process, the methodical, unsentimental work of documenting the truth, was the thing that steadied me when everything else felt uncertain. I have always been better at solving problems than at processing feelings, and in this case, that turned out to be useful. What I hope Piper takes from watching me navigate all of this, not the details, she's too young for those, but the shape of it, is that your integrity is not something other people can give back to you once they've taken it. You have to go get it yourself. You have to be willing to sit with uncomfortable truths, to do the hard, methodical work of understanding your own situation clearly, and then to act. Not from rage, but from a settled, unshakable knowledge of what is right. Adrian built a career on the foundation I laid. When the foundation was properly attributed, the career could not hold. That's not a story about punishment. It's just what happens when something is built on a claim that isn't true. The structure was always going to have to answer for its own load-bearing walls eventually. My name is on the permit submissions now. It's on the office door. It's in the directory where it should have been years ago. Some things you don't reclaim loudly. You just stop letting them be taken.